Chapter 11. No. Something rolled around inside Jess's head. He opened his mouth, but it was dry and no words came out. He jerked his head from one face to the next for someone to help him. Finally, his father spoke, his big rough hand stroking his wife's hair and his eyes downcast watching the motion. They found the bird girl this morning down in the creek. No, he said, finding his voice. Leslie hadn't drowned. She could swim real good. That old rope you kids been swinging on broke. His father went quietly and relentlessly on. They'd think she must have hit her head on something when she fell. No, he shook his head. No, his father looked it up. I'm real sorry, boy. No, Just was yelling now. I don't believe you. You're lying to me. He looked it around again wildly for someone to agree, but they all had their hands down except May Bailey, whose eyes were wide with terror. But Leslie, what if you die? No, he said straight at May Bailey. It's a lie. Leslie ain't dead. He turned it around and ran out the door, letting the screen bang sharply against the house. He ran down the gravel to the main road and then started running west away from Washington and Millsbrook and the old Perkins place. An arching car beeped and swerved and beeped again, but he hardly noticed. Leslie, that girl friend, rope broke fell you. The words exploded in his head like corn against the sides of the popper. God, dad you, Leslie, dad you. He ran until he was stumbling, but he kept on, afraid to stop, knowing somehow that running was the only thing that could keep Leslie from being dead. It was up to him. He had to keep going. Behind him came the bumpety of the pickup, but he couldn't turn around. He tried to run faster, but his father passed him and stopped the pickup just ahead, then jumped out and ran back. He picked Jess up in his arms as though he were a baby. For the first few seconds, Jess kicked it and struggled against the strong arms. Then Jess gave himself over to the numbness that was supposed to be let out from a corner of his brain. He leaned his weight up in the door of the pickup and let his head thud against the window. His father drove stiffly without speaking, though once he cleared his throat as though he were going to say something, but he glanced at Jess and closed his mouth. When they pulled it up at his house, his father sat quietly, and Jess could feel the man's uncertainty. So he opened the door and go out, and with the numbness floating through him, went in and lay down on his bed. He was awake, jerked suddenly into consciousness in the black stillness of the house. He sat up, stiff and shivering, although he was fully dressed from his windbreaker down to his sneakers. He could hear the breathing of the little girls in the next bed, strangely loud and uneven in the quiet. Some dream must have awakened him, but he could not remember it. He could only remember the mode of dread it had brought with it. Through the curtainless window, he could see the low-sided moon with hundreds of stars dancing in bright attendance. It came into his mind that someone he told him that Leslie was dead, but he knew now that had been part of the dreadful dream. Leslie could not die any more than he himself could die, but the words turned it over uneasily in his mind like lips started up by a cold wind. If he got up now and went down to the old Perkins place and knocked it on the door, Leslie could come to open it, P.T., jumping at her heels like a star around the moon. It was a beautiful night. Perhaps they could run over the hill and across the fields to the stream and swing themselves into Terabithia. They had never been there in the dark, but there was enough moon for them to find their way into the castle, and he could tell her about his stay in Washington. And Uplight eyes, he had been so dumb of him not to ask if Leslie could go too. He and Leslie and Miss Edmonds could have had a wonderful day, different, of course, from the day he and Miss Edmonds had, but still good, still perfect. Miss Edmonds and Leslie liked each other a lot. It would have been fun to have Leslie alone. I'm really sorry, Leslie. He took off his jacket and sneakers and scrolled it under the covers. I was dumb not to think of asking. "It's okay," Leslie would say. "I've been to Washington dozens of times. Did you ever see the buffalo hunt?" Somehow it was the one thing in all Washington that Leslie had never seen, and so he could tell her about it, describing the tiny bits hurtling to destruction. His stomach felt suddenly cold. It had something to do with the buffalo, with falling with that, with this region. He had not remembered it to ask if Leslie could go with them to Washington today. "You know, something weird?" "What?" Leslie asked it. "I was scared to come to Terabithia this morning. The coldness threatened to spread out from his stomach." He turned it over and lay on it. Perhaps it would be better not to think about Leslie right now. He would go to see her the first thing in the morning and explain everything. He could explain it better in the daytime when he had shaken up the effects of his unremembered nightmare. He put his mind to remembering the day in Washington, working on details of pictures and statues, dread going up the sound of Miss Edmonds' voice, recalling his own exact words and her exact answers. Occasionally, into the corner of his mind's vision would come a sensation of falling, but he pushed it away with the view of another picture or the sound of another conversation. Tomorrow he must share it all with Leslie. The next thing he was aware of was the sun streaming through the window. The little girl's bed was only rumpled covers, and there was movement and quiet taking from the kitchen. Lord, poor Miss Bessie. He'd forgotten all about her last night, and now it must be late. He felt for his sneakers and shifted his feet over the heels without tying the laces. His mother looked up quietly from the stove at the sound of him. Her face was set for a question, but she just nodded her head at him. The coldness began to come back. "I forgot, Miss Bessie. Your daddy's milking her. I forgot last night, too." She kept nodding her head. "Your daddy did it for you, but it wasn't an accusation. You feel like some breakfast?" Maybe that was why his stomach felt so odd. He hadn't had anything to eat since the ice cream Miss Edmonds had bought them at Miss Brock on the way home. Brenda and Ellie stared up at him from the table. The little girls turned it from their curtain show at the TV to look at him, and then turned it quietly back. He sat down on the bench. His mother put a plateful of pancakes in front of him. He couldn't remember the last time she had made pancakes. He doused them with syrup and began to eat. They tasted marvelous. "You don't even care, do you?" Brenda was watching him from across the table. He looked at her puzzled. His mouthful of Jimmy Dick's diet, I wouldn't be able to eat a bit. The coldness crawled up inside of him and floated over. Will you shut your mouth, Brenda Owens? His mother sprang forward. The pancake turner held threateningly high. Well, Mama, he's just sitting there eating pancakes like nothing happened. I'd been crying my eyes out. Ellie was looking first at Mr. Owens and then at Brenda. Boys ain't supposed to cry at times like this, are they, Mama? Well, it don't see from right for him to be sitting there eating like a brat. So I'm telling you, Brenda, if you don't shut your mouth. He could hear them talking, but they were farther away than the memory of the dream. He ate and he chewed it, he swallowed it. And when his mother put 3 more pancakes on his plate, he ate them too. His father came in with the milk. He poured it carefully into the empty cider jugs and put them into the refrigerator. Then he washed his hands at the sink and came to the table. As he passed it, Jess, he put his head lightly on the bowl shoulder. He wasn't angry about the milking. Jess was only dimly aware that his parents were looking at each other and then at him. Mr. Owens gave Brenda a hard look and gave Mr. Owens a look which was to say that Brenda was to be kept quiet. But Jess was only thinking of how good the pancakes had been and hoping his father would put down on more in front of him. But he knew somehow that he shouldn't ask for more. But he was disappointed that she didn't give him any. He thought then that he should get up and leave the table, but he wasn't sure where he was supposed to go or what he was supposed to do. Your mother and I thought we ought to go down to the neighbors and pay respects. His father cleared his throat. I think it would be fitting for you to come too. He stopped again, since you was the one that really noted the little girl. Jess tried to understand what his father was saying on him, but he felt stupid. What little girl? He mumbled it, knowing it was the wrong thing to ask. Ellie and Brenda both gasped. His father leaned down the table but put his big hand on top of Jess's hand. He gave his wife a quick, troubled look, but she just stood there, her eyes full of pain, saying nothing. Your friend Leslie is dead, Jess. You need to understand that. Jess slid his hand out from under his father's. He got up from the table. I know it ain't easy thing. Jess could hear his father speaking as he went into the bedroom. He came back out with his windbreaker on. You ready to go now? His father got up quickly. His mother took up her apron and patted her hair. May Bailey jumped up from the rug. I want to go too, she said. I never seen a dead person before. No, May Bailey sat down again as though slammed down by her mother's voice. We don't even know where she's laid out at May Bailey. Mr. Owens said more gently.